Hello everyone, and welcome to my part 2 for public speaking. So let's begin. There are two more questions that people ask me about public speaking as well. One of them is how to emphasize your speech. And what I mean by emphasize is emphasizing is stressing the point in your speech. Being a little bit energetic is one of the whole meaning, putting a whole meaning to your speech. I have to say that because being energetic doesn't mean that you have to be like all the jolly or happy part. It's really about you trying to point out the big deal of your whole speech, obviously. Distressing can be either to come out of a plan, of a plot. For instance, you rise your tone up to 1 point. There are a lot of tones in speaking, obviously. There's like 1 to 10 scale. So I would recommend if you want to emphasize 1 point in your speech, I recommend you to actually use 7 to 10. 7 to 10 will eventually make that point a little bit noticeable. People will focus on that point as well. There's no use of you being like a little flat tone on your speech. It doesn't really work that well. Speeches are meant to have a lot of tones just to eventually emphasize your whole word, the whole sentence itself. By saying that, it will eventually attract people because it gets a little lengthy and people get sleepy all the time when you do a speech. And to make them come back to the point, obviously you need to emphasize your points by, of course, there's also the use of stops, which I mean by periodic stops, like a 1 or 2 second stops per word. For instance, like this. See that I did that? It's just a second or 2 seconds of stopping. It can be that breaking point in how you are trying to actually gain a lot of points. It also helps you in impromptu. You don't need to take a breath like what I'm doing right now, obviously, but it works out really well. Secondly, I would like to talk about is another question people would say, how to make yourself look educational. Well, I forgot to mention there are like 2 scenarios of speaking. First is like a formal or educational one, or second is actually about, like TED Talk. Just a normal speech, just talking about experiences and also putting a little bit of humor, puns over here and there. But in some time we'll just talk about, we'll go through the formal way first. Normal speeches or formal speeches are more focused on you emphasizing something factual or something more of a saying from someone. For instance, like public figures like Winston Churchill or Martin Luther King Jr., those are one of those speakers that will always emphasize about human rights or maybe about the world. They inspire people. So I recommend you to use a lot of their quotes because it really works sometimes when you are using for a factual speech. When it comes to talks like TED Talk or maybe something of a motivational speech, trying to talk about something, talk about stories, like do something more engaging. Find stories on the internet, or maybe you have your own experiences. Do share with other people. I really recommend that. It really helps others, and also it helps people to actually recognize you as a figurehead. Not really, recognition is not really important. That actually, it depends on how you speak. It depends on how much points you have, and it depends how effective your points are to other people. There is a lot of drafting in making a speech. So, in some point in your speech, you need to emphasize or think about the words that you want to focus on. Sometimes I scribble on my scripts, scribbling a bit to stress out some points. There are points that I want to stop on, there are points that I need to go on and go through in detail. So I would eventually highlight these points in some way or another. I would recommend you use a little bit of symbols in your speech. Symbols that you understand alone. Meaning, like, for instance, you want to make a higher tone on one of those sentences or one of the words you want to emphasize. So you make a highlight of that. Make a symbol that you understand. Make a stop point where, like, for instance, like for me, I use 3 dots so that you stop for a few seconds, continuing on, and finish it all off like that. It's really about strategizing your whole speech, and it's how you would eventually go forward with what you're trying to say. It helps a lot when it comes to planning your own speech, obviously. Furthermore, I would like to do a little bit of tips, since I think I would just like put this in this part because I don't want this whole session to actually be so long. People say it's just too long. 12 minutes is a lot. So I'm just going to go straight with this. So what I've experienced is you need to be more energetic. I am not really energetic at this point. I don't know why. It just doesn't seem to work that way. So when you're doing a speech, please be a little bit energetic. What I mean energetic is like more hand moves, limited hand moves. Make it appropriate for the whole speech. The movements should be coordinated. Like in some point you need to use your right hand and left hand to balance the whole speech. Don't you use only the right hand in your speech and you use the left hand a little bit less in your speeches. It doesn't really work that way. It really doesn't emphasize your professionalism. Just like what I said, TED Talk has also a little bit of formality, but adding a little bit of humor, more stories, and more emphasizing of story of other people, points of one story, instead of the factual speeches. In some cases, I would say another tip from myself is to actually make more facial expressions. I'm not really good at facial expressions at first. I have to admit that. I might post my old public speaking videos that I still have, just a little bit more, and maybe sometime, but not now. I need to find them back. It doesn't have the right quality at all, but I'll just post it if you want to see it for yourself. And I don't, to be honest, I'm not really proud of that, but just basically it's just going to be an example for you, just to make you understand my point even more. And finally, for what I heard from my experience, there are 2 experiences. One is from the ESU, English Speaking Union Public Speaking contest, and there's also from my old school, my old college's competition as well. It is between the same colleges as well. So just to say, they are really different. For the ESU one, it eventually emphasizes on more towards the TED Talk version of speeches. Like you need to emphasize on stories, emphasize on points as well, and you need to put some little puns of humor just to make people laugh. I don't know why, but in the other version of those colleges that I fought for in public speaking, they eventually are a bit more formal, serious, and of course it requires a lot of facts. Just to put this into a conclusion, just to sum up, that speeches depend on your situation eventually. I'm giving these examples, I'm giving all of these tips in this video actually can help you in certain situations. Not all the situations are eligible to all my points. So you have to think, you have to make the situation clear. What will you use in the situation? Obviously, you need to emphasize what you're going to use in your speech. It's not under my control, it's not under what I have given you, the tips. It all depends on your own situation. And it depends on yourself. You can't force yourself to be a comedian if you don't have much puns in your speech. You can't force yourself to be a comedian and make jokes that people won't laugh on, obviously. Just like myself, I'm not really a good comedian at all. My speeches are more towards seriousness, obviously. I don't really make people laugh, but if the case that you are in needs you to be funnier in your speeches, I would say you go for it. If you are the comedian whatsoever, right? So just do it for yourself and don't really worry about anybody else's judgment or perspective, because it's your speech. You change the speech. The lines or the borders of your speech depend on yourself. And I think that's all for this part. If there's any more questions, if in the comment section down below, give your ideas as well. And I really appreciate those who approach me on Instagram saying and commenting a lot about the previous video. I really appreciate them, and I'm trying to improve those videos as well. So thank you very, very much. I really appreciate them. You're giving me the support to continue on with a lot of videos. This is a multi-content channel, so maybe I'll do something else in another video. Maybe about a podcast. I'm planning to do a podcast, so just wait to the day I'll release them. Don't worry, it's not going to be a little bit long. You just have to wait then. So thank you so much for watching. Until then, stay safe.